The Holy Knights. Man, this is a group, this is something that I've wanted to discuss with you for a while, and I actually promised you that I would, so here it is. The Holy Knights, I think they are going to be one of the best, one of the most powerful factions we're ever going to see in the series. They're giving serious Akatsuki vibes, but even cooler. They definitely have my interest, and I'm sure they have yours too. They're colorful, they're funny, they have a great dynamic as a group, as well as possessing abilities that are not only unique, but I suppose one could argue are hacks abilities. And what's been particularly interesting for me is to see each of their different backgrounds and how they fit into the group as a whole. Contrary to initial thought, they may not actually be all world nobles, or at least not traditionally anyways. We have some members who are actually related to the Gorosei, while others might not actually be part of the Celestial Dragons at all. But with what so little we know about these figures, I want to do an analysis, a quick analysis on some of the things that have piqued my interest so far, and use this to try and also predict on what we can expect from the Holy Knights going forward. But most importantly, as I've been thinking about the Holy Knights, as I have been doing a little bit more research, I think I've uncovered something that will be very interesting for you all too, because I've recently come to the conclusion that the Holy Knights are based off the Zodiac. So as we all probably know by now, many of the crews, many of the different factions or groups in One Piece have a unique assigned theme. For example, the Beast Pirates at Wano, they represented the playing card theme. The Baroque Work agents, they were all assigned a number or a day of the week or a special calendar event. Big Mom's family, they were all named after food. And these are just a few examples. But you can find this sort of thematic assignment all throughout One Piece. And I think the Holy Knights are going to be no exception to this. But with only a handful of the Holy Knights members introduced, it's not super clear what theme they're going to follow. But I think we can figure this out if we extrapolate, if we take a bit of a step back and we recognize the theme that is going on more broadly, starting with the Gorosei. The Gorosei are obviously based on the planets, a trend that sort of broke when Garling replaced Saturn after his death, but even then Garling still fit the planetary theme, or at least the celestial theme, because Garling's hair, when viewed sideways, resembled a crescent moon. Oda actually also said that if Garling was to grow out his hair and his beard even more, they would actually connect together to form a perfect full moon. But then we also came to see that when viewed from the front, which is something that we finally saw after Garling joined the ranks of the Gorosei, we found that his hair is actually shaped like a star, and then now perfectly fitting with this idea of the Elder Stars. And of course, there is a much broader celestial theme going on when it comes to the world government as a whole. The world nobles, for example, they've named themselves the Celestial Dragons, whereas Imu's a bit of a question mark, but there have been speculations about Imu representing the Earth, as well as Imu just representing outer space more generally, more broadly. And I have actually discussed Imu more specifically in greater detail as well, so please feel free to check out that video if you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on Imu. Interestingly, the celestial theme actually goes beyond this, because it even includes Luffy. Now we know him as the sun god Nika. But then there is also a very popular theory, a theory that speculates that the Straw Hats actually represent the Chinese zodiac, and the Chinese zodiac is based on the lunar cycle. And although that's only a speculation, there is a clear spirit animal thing that Oda himself has played with, such as in this color spread, and that seems to lend a little bit more credence to that theory. In any case, the celestial imagery is very, very strong. And so, when it comes to the Holy Knights in that case, a group that is so important to the world government, so high up in rank and power and authority, I think it would only make sense for the Holy Knights to fit in with this broader theme. I think it would only make sense for Oda to want to continue this outer world, outer space theme. And in that case, I have to say the Western Zodiac is very, very fitting. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Zodiac or the Western Zodiac signs are 12 constellations, each representing a particular period of the year. Constellations, simply put, are a group of stars. Now, some people also believe that a person's zodiac signs actually contributes to their personality, their attributes, and I'm not too sure how much I really believe in in astrology, but I definitely do see the connection sometimes. And in this case, when it comes to One Piece, a piece of media, I definitely think that Oda can have some fun and lean into this idea. Now, I have to admit that I'm personally not super well versed in this field. So if you're someone who's super into astrology and knows a lot more, then please leave some of your thoughts down below by leaving a comment. But I have obviously done more research as I started getting into this idea more and more, and I am more and more convinced that this is a very fitting theme, and we can already see how some of the nights that we've been introduced to do fit in or do represent one of the zodiac signs. But before I share my thoughts on each one, please take a quick second to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I'd really appreciate your help in getting to 100,000 subscribers. Okay, so with that established as to why I believe the Holy Nights are based on the zodiac, let's get straight into who I would match with which zodiac sign. Starting with the Holy Night that I'm personally most interested in, Gunko. I think Gunko may represent the Gemini. And for those of you who don't know, Gemini is the zodiac symbol that is represented by a pair of twins, and the Gemini period covers between May 21st to June 20th. It also happens to be the zodiac sign of my baby nephew, whom I just adore, but that's neither here nor there. But since I've mentioned him, have a look at this cutie pie whom I have started indoctrinating early. And indoctrination is going to be very important when it comes to Gunko. Anyways, assigning Gemini to Gunko may come a bit of a surprise to those who actually are aware of the zodiac symbols, because the more obvious Gemini representation within the Holy Nights may be Shamrock, seeing as we know that Shamrock literally does have a twin brother in Shanks. However, as I started dissecting the characters a little bit more, researching each of the zodiac signs a little bit more, I actually think there are loads of reasons why Gemini fits perfectly with Gunko instead. Like I said, I'm most interested in Gunko of all the Holy Nights. The reason why that is because I think there's so much about her that personally leaves us wanting more. There's a huge sense of mystery surrounding Gunko's character, and something that I've picked up on is that Gunko has this sense of duality within her. And this is why I think that Gemini, a pair of twins, two dos, that may mean that Gemini may actually be Gunko's sign. Initially, I actually thought that Sagittarius might be the fitting sign for Gunko, mostly based on the aesthetics and the appearance, because Gunko has arrow no mi, an arrow-based power, whereas the Sagittarius is represented by an archer, so again, the arrow. But I have since changed my mind, so let me explain this Gemini Gunko theory a little bit further. So most interesting about Gunko is that it seems that she may not be of the celestial dragon lineage herself. Compared to the rest of the Holy Nights, her introduction box only stated her name, no family name, no indication of which house, which noble family that she may hail from. And because we know from the interaction between Shamrocks and Gunko with Loki, we know that people can be invited into the ranks of the Holy Knights from outside of the celestial dragons. It's rare, but it happens. I mean, I guess we also knew that you could become a celestial dragon because of the whole situation with York, but now we also know that you can join and become one of the Holy Knights, a very elite, a very highly esteemed group. And in this case, it seems to be that Gunko is actually an example of someone who was, according to her own words, received the miracle of an offer, of an invitation to join the Holy Knights and become a celestial dragon. The fact that she delivered this line herself to Loki, I think that says so much. When she states how rare it is for peasants, for peasant humans, to get invited and get a chance to become one of the gods. It feels as if Gunko is talking from personal experience. That's why she's so offended when Loki calls them scum when he rejects their offer. Many of us have already noticed the fact that her arrow no mi power seems to be at least somewhat related to Imu's abilities, which then also begs the question as to whether she's been groomed, whether she's been indoctrinated, maybe even potentially genetically modified to become this soldier of the celestial dragons, which is where we get back to this idea of the duality in her character. Even in her appearance, there is this clear idea of duality. For one, she has mismatched eyes, each eye being of a different color, which may be a symptom, which may be a mark of her ability. Again, going back to that idea of the genetic modification, and that may be an indication of her background as to how she became a celestial dragon and joined the ranks of the Holy Knights. But her attire as well. There is this sense of duality in that her top half seems to be fully covered, but she's left most of her lower half bare. And then when it comes to appearance, not to mention that she looks an awfully lot like Koala. She's even dressed similarly to Koala, at least her headgear. And knowing what we know of Koala's past as a slave at Marijois, I can't help but wonder whether these two were twins or maybe just sisters, but twin sisters who were unfortunately split up. Whereas Koala managed to get free, eventually joining the Revolutionary Army, Gunko's path has taken the complete opposite route. Gunko has instead joined the ranks of one of the most elite groups that represent the Celestial Dragons. And I think that's how this Gemini theme may really fit in with Gunko's character. Gunko may be part of a pair of twins. And if that is the case, I think this really explains a lot of the character traits that she has exemplified so far. There's this definite air of superiority and disdain that Gunko has shown for non-celestial dragons, and although that is common amongst all the celestial dragons, there's something about Gunko where when she mentions it, it almost seems forced, or at least that it's been taught, almost like she's overcompensating for the fact that she knows that she's lucky to have been selected to join this group. If she hadn't been selected, she might also share the fate of these scum peasant humans. And I think that also explains her interaction with Summers at the end of chapter 1142. When Summers asks Gunko what her biggest fear is, Gunko replies that she's most afraid of Nika. And again, we have seen others within the world government fear Nika, the higher-ups like the Gorosei, like Imu. But for Oda to focus on Gunko's admission, for Oda to end the chapter on Gunko saying that she's afraid of Nika, I think that means a lot more. Especially when you start to think that if she was a slave, she may have encountered the stories of Nika the Liberator alongside her other fellow slaves. However, since being chosen by the Celestial Dragon, Gunko has since been indoctrinated to view Nika through the same lens as the world government, viewing Nika as not a liberator who's going to bring peace and joy, but Nika as this very evil, dangerous force who represents destruction. Again, in this response, there is this sense that Gunko has been taught, very specifically taught to feel and view things in a very specific way. And so finding out this history would just be very, very exciting, might show us a lot more lore behind the Celestial Dragons and their history, but I'm also equally excited and interested in finding out whether this means Gunko has the potential for her to actually switch sides. If she's not originally part of the Celestial Dragons, if she is aware or finds out about her past, if she faces Koala, for example, and if she witnesses the truth of the Nika for herself, could Gunko change course? And I think Oda may have hinted at a possibility of this based on this chapter, based on this panel where Gunko explains her abilities. Gunko states that the arrows are a confirmed path of the future, a declaration of unavoidable violence, but it is possible for her to change course. Could it be that this dialogue was actually a subtle hint about Gunko's characterization and her arc in the future of the series? A hint that Gunko may actually change course. It certainly wouldn't be the first time we've seen a villain be swayed over to the side of the good. We actually often see key female antagonistic figures undergo this sort of transformation that's also coupled with a heart-wrenching backstory that explains their villainy in the first place. Robin would probably be the best example, but we've also seen it in Viola, for example. Maybe Gunko is next in line to join this list. And so all of this makes me very, very excited about Gunko and what we may see of her in the future of the series. And I spoke more on Gunko than I expected, but I did promise you all at the end of my discussion on chapter 1142 that I did have things that I wanted to say about Gunko, and what can I say? I want to deliver. Anyways, let's move on and let's discuss Shamrock, seeing as I did mention that he may have been the more obvious choice for the Gemini, but then I of course assigned it to Gunko instead. So like I said, Gemini being represented via Shamrock is a clear, obvious answer because of the fact that he is a confirmed twin, whereas Gunko, that's just based on speculation. But I have to say that when I look at Shamrock, I actually think the more obvious, the more fitting sign would be a Leo. Leo is the zodiac sign that covers between July 23rd to August 22nd, which actually means that I'm a Leo, by the way. But it's a fire sign that represents the lion, as the name suggests, Leo. And the traits that are often associated with Leo are leadership, charisma, confidence. And I just think that all of these words are words that immediately come up when you think of Shamrock. Shamrock is the charismatic, bold leader of the God's Knights. His bright red hair very much fits with this idea of Leo being a fire sign. He's got this wonderful mane, this glorious mane of hair. Whereas if we were to think back on the Gemini is an air sign. And I just don't think the airy nature fits Shamrock all that well, whereas the fire really does. Whereas actually Gunko does fit that air sign because of the arrows that, swishes all throughout the air. She's even been able to use her abilities to actually take flight. So when it comes to Shamrock, I think a fire sign is very fitting. I actually think both the Aries or the Leo could fit. They're both fire signs. They're both strongly related to leadership and ambition. But I think what makes me want to go with Leo over Aries is the fact that Shamrock looks a bit more like a lion than a ram. Because that's what the constellation for Aries is, a ram. And I don't know if I can explain why he's more of a lion than a ram, but tell me if you agree with me here. But also let me know if I'm missing out on anything about Shamrock that you think actually makes him more resemble a ram, because I'd love to know. Anyways, moving on, Shepherd Summers. Summers just being so full of character from the get-go was one of my favorite parts of being introduced to all of these new Holy Knights characters. His overall aesthetics or his appearance or his general vibes, he gives off that old veteran feel, similar to the other old-timer, infamous pirates that we've seen in the past. Rayleigh being an immediate comparison that comes to mind, not because I'm necessarily equating Summers and Rayleigh's strength, but who knows, maybe Summers really is that strong considering he is part of the Holy Knights, but just based on the looks. He's clearly a senior within the Holy Knights because unlike Gunko and even killing him, we don't see Summers refer to Shamrock as commander. Summers seems to carry himself with a much more carefree and unbothered attitude, but then he also has this comical punch to him. And I think this attitude may be owed or may be attributed to the fact that he comes from a very established noble family, a family that has another one of its members a part of the Gorosei. But I think this personality, I think this attitude adds a very unique, very interesting dynamic to the Holy Knights. It does seem like we have a group of figures who have varying levels of experience, varying backgrounds. He also seems to be very deep and loud about his idea of love. The way that he speaks to Gunko in chapter 1142 demonstrates this, as well as the heart-patterned boxes that we see, as well as the rose on his chest and the sword hilt having roses thorns. This all seems to emphasize the romantic ideals that Summers seems to have, and it adds a lot of character to this new figure because it adds a lot of layers instead of all the God's Knights just being very stern, firm, or just hot-headed elitists. His attitude, for example, is in stark contrast to Shamrock's. But I think what interests me most about this characterization is how it's going to come into play against the Straw Hats. For example, some sort of interaction between Summers and Sanji would be great. It would be fantastic to witness because of their shared interest in love and romance. Maybe the two are going to face off physically, but as they do so, emotionally and intellectually, they may actually develop this super strong bond. Or an even better match may actually be against Zoro. Not only because that would make it a guaranteed sword fight, but also because it would just be hilarious to have Zoro fight a very skilled swordsman who reminds him very, very much of his friendly rival Sanji. Either way, we probably won't have to wait long because all of these characters are at Elbaf now. I mean, isn't life grand? Anyways, when it comes to the Zodiac, I actually initially thought to assign Sagittarius to Summers, mostly because the ruling house or the ruling planet for Sagittarius is Jupiter, and so there's a link there with Jupiter or Shepherd Jupiter being related to Shepherd Summers. But because that doesn't relate to Summers specifically, and seeing as the Gorosei have their own planetary theme already, and I do think that that is related but very separate to this Zodiac theme for the Holy Knights, I think I have a star sign that's more apt for Summers individually, specifically, and that one, I think, is the Libra Zodiac. So the Libra Zodiac is represented by a scale. Libra is known to be one of the most romantic of the Zodiac signs because Libra's ruling planet is Venus, the planet of love. Also, with its constellation being the scales, often this star sign is attributed or is associated with balance in addition to romance. And I think balance is quite a fitting description for 4 summers. With all the character traits that I've mentioned about him earlier, he seems like a very measured individual. He's very carefree, but also confident, but not in an arrogant way. And look, there are other star signs that may be relevant, especially others that are also related to love, but for now, I'm gonna stick with Libra. So this leaves us with Killingham of the Rimoshifu family. Killingham is an interesting one because we only seem to have met him in his hybrid Zoan form, and that also raises a really interesting question as to why was he even transported to Elbaf in that form? Why was he already in that hybrid Zoan form? What does that say about his usual state? What does that say about his devil fruit, if he indeed does have a devil fruit? Anyways, Killingham is another character that is quite mysterious, especially because of the cloud rings or the smoke ribbons, whatever you want to call it, that circles around him. This is the first time that we've seen a character on the world government side, on the baddie side, who has smoke ribbons, who has cloud rings that are white. Usually we've seen it black. Naturally, you wonder, what does this mean for Killingham's character? Is he actually a good guy? Does it mean that he's just not as bad as the others? Which doesn't seem to be the case because he is equally involved in the kidnapping of children, so it's hard to make an excuse for him to say that he is not as bad as the others. So maybe it just has to do with the devil fruit powers themselves, which is still a little difficult to explain because we don't really know all that much about the devil fruits, but I'm sure we will receive more information soon. A character quirk that I really enjoy of his is this idea, he's embodying the saying, sleeping on a cloud. And I think it would be funny if his own sleepiness is a side effect of his devil fruit ability, similar to how we've seen this throughout the series with some of the other characters, like Django, for example. He falls asleep or he hypnotizes himself whilst he's trying to hypnotize others. We have a history of Oda incorporating this trope, and I do think that Killingham is next on this list. As to how all of this translates into zodiac signs, well, I think that Killingham may be best represented by the Pisces. Pisces is represented, or is a constellation made up of 2 fish that are swimming in opposite directions. And this is supposed to represent the duality of the Pisces. It's commented that the Pisces is both ethereal as well as grounded. And I think this might explain a lot of what we've seen of Killingham so far. Like I said, the smoke rings, the white ribbons. Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Duality. Even his character trait of falling asleep all the time. Pisces, despite being a water-based zodiac, they're often associated with being quite airy, of being quite up in the clouds. And like I said, Killingham is the embodiment of sleeping on a cloud. Killingham is obviously very much inspired by this mystical creature of the Kiddin. Kiddin is a chimerical creature made up of, different parts. And I think that goes back to what I was saying about how Killingham is a bit of a mystery. It seems like there are some of this duality, some of these different parts making up this character. It's not quite clear. It's not easy to make a sense of him yet. So I'm going to say the Pisces for Killingham. And that wraps up the 4 God's Knights that we've been introduced to so far, but we've got a bit of a problem here because in the silhouette that we've seen of the Holy Knights in chapter 1083, there were 9 figures, and the problem is that the zodiac signs, well, there's 12 zodiac signs. Now, we could say that silhouette back in chapter 1083 was covered by speech bubbles, so maybe some of the figures within the Holy Knights aren't actually all represented there, or another alternative, another explanation could be that there are or have been in fact 12 Holy Knights members, but not all are current members. There are 9 current members, or maybe 8, seeing as Garling left. Actually, you know what? I think Vigilant Garling could have his own zodiac sign, and I would actually say that he probably represents the Aries, whereas Shamrock represents the Leo, because the Aries is much more strongly related to leadership. It is very much more fierce, it is very hot-headed, and I think Garling represents the Aries quite well, and that clears up Shamrock with Leo. But we've also seen 2 other God's Knight members during the God Valley flashback, for example, so they may have retired by now. Or, by the end of this series, there could be 12 Holy Knights members, each lining up with one of the zodiac signs. Anyways, seeing as we have only been introduced to 4 current Holy Knights members, this means that we have plenty of time to keep considering even better connections. But for now, this has just been some of my thoughts on the Holy Knights and the fact that they may all be represented by the zodiac symbols, but I'd love to hear what you think, so please let me know by leaving a comment below. If you enjoyed today's video, please like the video, please share the video, and again, please do subscribe because I'd really appreciate your help in getting to 100,000 subscribers. You can also support the channel more by becoming a Patreon or channel member like these these wonderful, wonderful people. But as always, I thank you guys so much and just appreciate you for listening to another one of my ramblings. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.